Welcome back to the Crypto Clown World podcast. I am your host with the honks, Jason Bruce, honking back in on the 16th of June. It is Father's Day 2024, and I do have my co-host with me here as always, Mr. Christopher Lundy. How are you doing today, sir?
All right, man. It's a beautiful day and very grateful to be here on a momentous Father's Day for many fathers out there if you're a father. So, congratulations if you're a dad. Yeah.
Thank you,
Hope you're
sir.
getting some good barbecue in and hopefully plenty of people showed up to give you high fives.
Much appreciated. We will definitely be hitting the grill in a little bit here.
Oh yeah.
So, with all that said, uh, we have some stuff that we can grill through here real quick. I know you've got some interesting talking points as always, so I'll let you jump on in. We'll see what you got.
Yeah, well, speaking of grills, thank you, Jason. Speaking of grills, or being up in someone's grill, um, there's a major announcement that the head of the State Duma Defense Committee of Russia made today. They stated that any American F-16 fighter jets, including their bases outside of the Ukrainian conflict zone, will become legitimate targets for the Russian military if they participate in combat missions. Now, I'm not going to go into any expanded context of that in terms of what was said, other than to say this is that the reason why NATO countries are even considering doing this is because every time that they ship F-16s into Ukraine, the moment they cross the border, they're lit up by ballistic missiles, or they get into the factory and the factory disappears, blown up by ballistic missiles or cruise missiles, or a host of hypersonic missiles, you name it. So they the transportation corridor of military equipment is not secure for NATO, obviously, because they're transporting this into an active war zone, and they have no way of reliably supplying the Ukrainians consistently with those jets, armaments, etc. So that's why they're resorting to this. So it's just a warning to EU countries to, you know, carefully consider their next steps, because the first slip up will result in an expansion of the conflict zone. And my opinion of the matter is that this is probably the intended effect of the Eurocrats, where they want to goad Russia into doing something uh, that would that they could seize upon from a propaganda perspective to paint as a miscalculation. Moving on, also with Russia, lots of news about Russia to start off the show. I need to cover this a little bit more today because we have limited time, and that's going to be the most important geopolitical sector. Now, a 20-year deal has been signed this week between Russia and Iran, and that signing has been completed. It is now official. Now, this deal is going to substantially increase relations between both countries in multiple spheres: military, economic, and political, but mainly military and economic, with economic coming a close second. So the reason I say that is because Russia is providing Iran with significantly advanced military technology. Not that they don't already have access to that, but they are going to be providing them with nuclear power plants, nuclear submarines, ICBM technology, Su-35 production inside of Iran, which is Russia's flagship fighter jet, as well as T-14 tanks, which is their flagship tank. So this level of buildup of both the maritime and land-based military assets of Iran speaks to an effort to decentralize Russia's hard and soft power in such a way that they do not have to act militarily directly against uh, the West, because Russia's trying to avoid a wider war using deterrence, right? So that seems to be the play here, but it could also be utilized uh, by adversaries to smuggle those technologies out. So this is not a deal that is without risk involved for Russia or for Iran, as we've seen with uh, American MQ-9 Reaper drones being hacked and remotely landed in Yemen. If there's any vulnerabilities to any of this technology, there will be repercussions for Iran and the Russians. So this type of at least a supply level escalation is likely to see some type of infiltration attempts. Moving on. The St. Petersburg International Economic Conference happened this month, and there's a television network called ODA TV, ODA TV, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I'm assuming so. Now, Alexander Dugin was interviewed during this conference, where he stated that he evaluated the last visit of the Turkish foreign minister to China, which is Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. And he stated that should Turkey join BRICS, it will result in Turkey exiting NATO, which is interesting because just this week, Turkey brokered a deal with the United States to purchase F-16s. So this is interesting. On the one hand, Turkey is buying F-16s from the United States and simultaneously in negotiations to exit NATO. So what this means is that NATO is going to have no access to the Bosphorus. They'll have no access to the Black Sea anymore, at least over Turkish airspace, right? And Eastern Europe is growing increasingly hostile to the EU centrists as well as NATO. So I would say that it's entirely possible that these folks are going to turn Europe or potentially Eastern Europe either into an internal conflict zone or maybe soften them up for invasion or infiltrate in some manner. And the reason and the evidence I give for that is the meddling in the affairs of the Republic of Georgia after they passed the foreign agent law. So expect to see some spy versus spy, shall we say, fun times in the months and years ahead as a result of that one. Moving on. This story made me shake my head and wonder what was going on here, because first of all, I did not know that South Korea had banned short selling, and any attempts of economists in the past to ban short selling were met with derision by the financial establishment. But this was posted to X by Sino_market is the account, and it was posted this week. And in it, they state that South Korea is going to lift their short selling ban after March 2025, which I found to be very interesting because this is somewhat unrelated, but after March 2025 is when we, at least I, expect to see significant movements in the crypto market, or at least something close to the end of the bull cycle. So why then in that exact month? That's something that interests me. So I'll be looking at the economic charts of various assets that are experiencing inflows, as well as ones that are experiencing outflows, to see what some of those potential short selling targets are. And one of those short selling targets I'm going to cover later in the show that may surprise the audience. Okay, moving on. Okay, so this is an article from moneymetals.com. Now, I did not cover this last week because I already talked about gold sufficiently, but this is published on June 7th. And the title of the article is Gold ETFs Globally Report Inflows for First Time in a Year. And as I've spoken to in previous shows, those inflows have, virtually were a torrent outwards over the course of the last couple of months. So gold-backed exchange-traded funds reported net inflows of gold for the first time in a year, and that was in May 2024. The funds based in Europe and Asia led the way as total gold holdings by ETFs globally rose by 8.2 tons, which is interesting because Turkey in April 2024 increased their reserves by 8 tons. So if that's funds based in Europe and Asia, and Turkey just added 8 tons, but that means that this is somewhat old news. That means that now this is by ETFs. This is not nation states. So the global holdings of ETFs are now approximately 3,087.9 tons. Excuse me. So that's a pretty significant holding of gold. And the assets under management by gold-backed ETFs has risen to $234 billion, which is a 2% increase, which is the highest AUM reported by gold-backed funds globally in the last 2 years. So I expect precious metals ETFs to be a little bit flat to down, in my opinion. And the reason why I say that is because there's been an effort that I covered in a show that we did several weeks ago about, and it was the top story about the DTCC and Chainlink working together on exchange traded fund tokenization. So those inflows and outflows will likely be tokenized in the future, and they may lead to even more inflows. So the efforts to tokenize may be the reason why this is slowing a bit, but due to geopolitical heat getting turned up, I think that it makes sense that these ETFs would see some inflows after the significant outflows that went into crypto ETFs, specifically Bitcoin ETFs. But moving on to more geopolitics. So the UN this week released the findings of an investigation that they backed that has found that Israel has committed war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza since the October 7th, 2023 attacks initially by Hamas. Now, in the report, they state that Israel has been responsible for, and I quote, war crimes of starvation as a method of warfare, murder or willful killing, intentionally directing attacks against civilians and civilian objects, forcible transfer, sexual violence, torture and inhuman or cruel treatment, arbitrary detention, and outrages upon personal dignity, close quote. And that was what the inquiry concluded. They also found that, and I quote, the crimes against humanity of extermination, gender persecution targeting Palestinian men and boys, murder, forcible transfer, and torture and inhuman and cruel treatment, close quote, were also mentioned. So this is something to look at with, a discerning eye, in my opinion, ladies and gentlemen, because while the UN is doing this, they're also doing nothing about what's happening in Ukraine, right? That war isn't stopping. They're not doing everything that they can to say, oh, Ukraine has committed war crimes or they're doing any of these types of things to their own people. They're only focusing that effort on Israel. There's no, arrest warrant out for Zelensky. There's no arrest warrant out for the heads of Azov battalion. And the reason why is because they're NATO assets. But technically speaking, Israel is within NATO's protective umbrella as well. Turkey just to the north of Israel by decent distance, is still north along the Eastern Mediterranean, is a NATO ally, technically speaking. But with the current events, we are seeing a divergence here, right? And it is still something that I consider to be, unfortunately, just more of like a political move to you know, push back against criticism by upping the anti-rhetoric in terms of the rhetorical aspects of it, right? But the war continues unabated, and UN buildings continue to be destroyed left and right. So I find it interesting that this is the case, but the war of words between Israel and the UN continues, and in my opinion, it's difficult to get a read on it, mainly because of the converging and diverging narratives, as well as inconsistent talking points coming from the UN, especially their global backing of the COVID, catastrophe as well. I find it to be of questionable ingenuity. Anyway, moving on. More news on Boeing. Their sales have fallen off a cliff, ladies and gentlemen. They received just 4 orders in May of 2024 and 0 MAX 737 business for the second month in a row. Now, they saw Aerolíneas Argentinas cancel an order for a single MAX jet. Now, this is as a result of the fallout from the blowout of a side panel on a MAX during a flight in January 2024. And the results are comparing unfavorably with Europe's Airbus, which reported net orders for 15 planes in May and 27 sales, but only had 12 cancellations. But Boeing's is completely flatlined. And regardless of the slow pace of these sales, they have a backlog of more than 5,600 orders. So that should give you a clue as to what was happening here. If you got a backlog of 5,600 orders, then you clearly don't have sufficient manufacturing capacity to bail out those orders. And that could be one of the reasons why we're seeing all these quality control problems. But again, since they're under criminal investigation by the Department of Justice, there could be more to this that we don't know about. So stay tuned on that. Moving on, I'll cover this briefly. The president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, has publicly announced that they will be suspending all coal exports to Israel, um, citing the ongoing campaign in Gaza. Now, this is important because Israel gets over 50% of its coal imports from Colombia. So overnight, Israel just lost half of its coal supply. So now it's a small fraction of Colombia's total coal exports, which surpassed around $9 billion in 2023. But it still highlights the significance of Colombian coal to Israel because according to Colombia's National Statistics Department, coal exports amounted to over $320 million in the first 8 months of 2023. So, while that's not a lot of money from an economic standpoint for very large economies such as Israel's, it still represents a considerable percentage of their energy capacity being lost from coal sources. And considering the blockade activity, gaining access to additional resources for energy is going to be very difficult unless there is some effort to de-escalate the situation. So at some point, whether it's diplomacy or running out of resources, the engine appears to be slowing down on that war at this time. Moving on. This was not news I was expecting to see, but as the Zero Hedge article was published on June 11th, the United States has lifted a 10-year weapons ban on the Ukrainians' neo-Nazi brigade, Azov brigade specifically. And this is from a press release. The U.S. State Department on Tuesday announced that they're lifting a long-time ban on giving weapons and training to Ukraine's Azov brigade. Now, interestingly, the Azov battalion have consistently been seen with swastika patches, Schwarzsonne patches, and considerable Third Reich and Nazi imagery on their uniforms. And we've even seen them scribbled on Abrams tanks that were sent to Ukraine on live published television. Interestingly, I believe it was a month or two ago, Grant Shapps, the defense minister of the United Kingdom, was on video in front of one of these Abrams tanks, and while the video was playing, you could see one of these swastikas scribbled on it. So now the United States State Department is now openly financing and, in this case, arming Azov battalion as we speak. So I think questions need to be asked is why is it that the United States State Department and the United States in general is supporting a neo-Nazi battalion at the exact same time that they're covering for what's happening in the Levant? And that's an intellectual inquiry that I encourage the audience to do, ladies and gentlemen. Moving on. Moscow has suspended trading in dollars and euros on the Moscow Stock Exchange. And the reason for this is because of recent U.S. sanctions that were imposed on the platform. Suspending trading in dollars and euros has resulted, and this is going to be probably a watershed moment in the history of world finance, ladies and gentlemen, because this represents the formal severing of the Western financial system from the Russian financial system, potentially in perpetuity. We could have come forward, stopped these wars, and changed the course. But we chose not to, and now we're in a situation where we're not going to be able to gain access to any aspect of any of these economies with our native currencies. at least from this time forward. And even if those sanctions aren't lifted, Russia's willingness to, do business with us is likely to decrease or completely disappear for an extended period of time as a result of this change. So, another sad day in the decline of the United States of America. Moving on. Another Zero Hedge article, and this is a pretty important story. Dexon China Holdings Co. Got liquidated this week, and the property bear market continues to fall off a cliff in China. Asian stocks are mostly red on Tuesday in Hong Kong on the Hang Seng Index, down about 1.04%, and in China generally on the CSI 300, down about 0.87%. Now, this is as the Chinese property bear market deepened as Beijing's attempt to stabilize the economy wanes, following yet more bad news of developer Dexon China Holdings Co. ordered into liquidation by a Hong Kong court. So the supply of large-scale real estate is disappearing, and many of these holdings are for apartments and high rises that people don't even live in, and the economic engine of speculative real estate investment that crashed and burned in the United States of America has hit China, but it's hitting in orders of magnitude worse than the 2008 crisis. So my question is, how is China going to manage this deleveraging operation without experiencing massive capital flight or risks to its international reputation as a peacemaker? Well, China is suffering the consequences of its own actions, sadly, especially the one-child policy. You're not going to have anywhere near as many people available to service that debt or to maintain economic stability if your population continues to decline in a disastrous rate. And that's what we're seeing. This is what population decline does to economies, ladies and gentlemen. The entire economy falls apart because economies have to have people and infrastructure. If you remove one of those two from the equation, that's when things start to go downhill. Moving on. Now, this is an article from 2023. It's behind a paywall on Zero Hedge, but I wanted to bring it up for an important reason because, as I mentioned earlier in the show about the lifting of the short selling ban in May or after March 2025 by South Korea, well, I think the reason why countries like South Korea and loosely adjacent allies of the U.S. imperial axis, etc., the reason why they either banned or attempted to ban short selling is because BlackRock is making a losing bet on the so-called Ukrainian reconstruction narrative. And this was last year after the fall of Bakhmut, which happened, close to a year ago. And that proved beyond the shadow of a doubt that additional Russian victories were inevitable because Bakhmut was the easternmost stronghold of the Ukrainian military. It was where all of their force projection was being able to be directed from. And now it's gone, and they continue to advance further and further westward. Now, this is a quote from the article, and this is from Martin Armstrong. And this is a direct quote from Mr. Armstrong. Quote, "Indeed, Zelensky prays for the destruction of more Ukrainian property so he will get his cut from BlackRock for rebuilding Ukraine, which our computer says will not happen. I stress once again, do not invest in this BlackRock venture which rubs its hands in blood, and at least Pilate tried to wash his hands after sentencing Christ, not BlackRock or Zelensky. It will become a classic short. Sorry, I do not believe Aladdin has the database needed to make such a speculative investment." Close quote. If you haven't read this article and you do have a premium subscription to Zero Hedge, or if you manage to clip this article and save it for later, have a look at that. I saved that anecdote from the article to make sure that I could distribute that widely in the event that people had questions for me about it, but it also speaks to the fact that no one is invincible, ladies and gentlemen. BlackRock has overextended themselves on these narratives. It doesn't matter how much stuff they own. If they set their own house on fire, there's no other liquidation path for them to choose. If they own all the liquidation paths and they're setting themselves on fire, there's nowhere else to go. It's literally a controlled demolition of their own balance sheet. So there could be financial warfare between Russia and BlackRock that we don't know about, either behind the scenes or otherwise, because BlackRock is openly stating and through their actions that they're an adversary of Russia by doing this. It's like, yeah, we'll help you rebuild Ukraine after the war. But that's not really what they're doing, because they're putting in all these police state infrastructures at the same time. So not all quote unquote investments are good investments, even if they make you money, ladies and gentlemen, especially if you want to live in a 1984 dystopia. What's the point of having money if it can simply be looted from you digitally when you're asleep? There's no point. So I would encourage everyone listening to think hard about their who they give their energy and their time to, especially as it relates to their financial investments. Moving on. Nigeria has dropped charges. They dropped the charges against the Binance executives that they extrajudicially initially held without charges, but they have dropped those charges against the Binance executives. So it looks like there were some issues there that needed to be hashed out. But here's the long and short of it. So the tax charges against Tigran Gambaryan and Nadim Anjarwalla, led by the FIRS of Nigeria, have been dropped, according to a family spokesperson. And they revised the charges so they could only apply to Binance as a company, with Gambaryan no longer needing to appear in court. But they're both still facing a money laundering trial, with the next hearing scheduled for June 19th. And Gambaryan remains detained. So while they dropped the charges, he's still detained. And there were efforts by members of the Biden administration to put the squeeze on Nigeria to let them go, but they applied to join BRICS. So this is another tug of war battleground between East and West that we're seeing. Moving on. This is, according to the Associated Press, there was an article that was released this week, but I'm just going to cover the top talking points of it. And these are anecdotes mainly from Navy Commander Eric Blomberg. And there are four talking points here. First is as follows. I'll list the rest of them later on. So, number one, the U.S. Navy is locked in combat with a shadowy Iran-backed rebel group based in Yemen. Notice he did not say Ansar Allah. He said a shadowy Iran-backed rebel group. He could have openly just said Ansar Allah, but he did not. Very interesting. Second, the U.S.-led campaign against the Houthis has turned into the most intense running sea battle the Navy has faced since World War II. And Commander Blomberg went on to state that with the USS Laboon, and I quote, "I don't think people really understand just kind of how deadly serious it is what we're doing and how under threat the ships continue to be," close quote. Fourth, all signs suggest the warfare will intensify, putting U.S. sailors, their allies, and commercial vessels at more risk. So this is a naval commander of the USS Laboon working on the USS Laboon or with them, stating that U.S. sailors, their allies, commercial vessels are, quote, under threat, close quote. So, and the fact that he's comparing this to World War II in the naval, I'm assuming that he's referring to the naval battles against Japan, which if you look at any historical videos of the war in the Pacific during World War II, they weren't pretty. So that just goes to show how much we're not seeing in terms of what's being reported, ladies and gentlemen. Moving on, South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa was successfully reelected as president and entered into an alliance with the Democratic Alliance Party. And I think this is a good move for South Africa because the Democratic Alliance Party is chaired by a man of Boer descent. And there have been calls in South Africa's Communist Party, Economic Freedom Fighters. Their slogan is "Kill the Boer, shoot, shoot," and it was ruled that it was not hate speech by the High Court of South Africa. But even after that, 44 MPs voted for EFF leader Julius Malema to be president of South Africa, a man that called for killing his own neighbors. Right. So there is still and still are problems that can be exploited inside of South Africa by the West through the EFF. But interestingly, the EFF also has a very favorable and close relationship with Russia. So this is another tug of war uh, influence competition space that I expect we'll see more interesting developments rather than less. Moving on, we've got, and this is going to be my last talking point of the day. If there's any others, we can cover them later. If there's anything in Q&A, but this is going to be the last one of the day. And this is a Zero Hedge article that was published yesterday, June 15th. The title of it is Military Draft Coming. House passes measure to automatically register men for selective service. Here's the leader. The House of Representatives on Friday approved its version of the annual defense policy bill, effectively clearing the $883.7 billion National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, to move forward in a 217 to 199 vote, which largely fell along party lines. Only 3 Republicans opposed it. A number of controversial amendments are part of it, setting up a further fight with Democrats as it moves forward, including a measure empowering the National Guard to crack down on the southern border. In other words, preventing people from escaping America. Continuing on with the quote. But among the most interesting aspects to the bill for fiscal year 2025 is an amendment to the NDAA, which automatically registers all draft age male U.S. residents with the Selective Service System. Close quote. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The United States, at least on paper, appears to be preparing to forcibly conscript U.S. citizens to go fight somewhere. And if we look at the campus protests to stop these wars, I think it's pretty safe to assume, especially with approximately 94% of the American population, roughly speaking, opposed to the Ukraine war, this is not just a goading, this is rather forceful. Now, this automatic registration covers all male U.S. residents initially in the bill up to age 24, but it actually got raised to the age of 26, which is very interesting. And how did this happen? Well, the draft age was increased between the ages of 18 to 24 to 18 to 26. So if you're 24, 25 years old right now, war breaks out next year and you get drafted, well, the person that was responsible for this was Representative Chrissy Houlihan. She led that selective service measure. And her father, Andrew C.A. Jampeler, who was a naval aviator, was born in Lviv, Ukraine in 1942. And interestingly, he and his mother, who at the time also survived the Holocaust, emigrated to the United States when he was 4 years old. So this is coming from someone whose own family fled the World War II conflict zone to forcibly put people back into that very same conflict zone. Think about what that means, ladies and gentlemen, and how long running this plan must have been. And that's going to top it off for today's talking points. Jason, we got limited time, so I'll hand it back over to you for Q&A and TA respectively. Back to you, sir.
Thanks as always, Chris. It's pretty eye-opening. That last one, the younger members of our audience should definitely have their radar up when it comes to that. And, you know, if people aren't aware, there is quite a bit of influence from people who have dual citizenship with a certain country that we've talked about ad nauseum here. So if you're not aware of those things, start looking into it a little bit more, because it looks like all of this stuff is going to be coming to a head pretty soon, unfortunately. So make sure you have your investments in line. Make sure that you have an exit strategy or some type of a plan if you're in that age range and we may potentially get drafted. Don't end up in jail. Have a plan if you can. Try and get out. Hopefully this stuff won't be what it could potentially be, but the writing's on the wall, folks, so better to be prepared than than have it come up and bite you in the ass. So, with all
One
that
thing I want
said,
to say, Jason, is that it's important to be courageous in this time. It's very important to be courageous in this time, especially morally courageous.
yeah, we have
Because
to be, man.
at the end of the day, you know, we are living in a time where we are being demanded to act against our own conscience. Now is
In
the
our
time
own
to say no.
country, really,
It's as
when it
simple as
comes
that.
down to it, it's acting against our own country's
Yeah.
interests. It's
Mhm.
high level espionage at this point.
Yeah. And this is another example, another large example, ladies and gentlemen, of what state capture looks like.
Yep. Yep, that's exactly right. When the enemy is not only inside your walls but making the decisions for your government, that's when you need to step back and start understanding that there needs to be action taken, and we don't really have a whole lot of time left, more than likely. And, you know, according to their plan, we have about 5.5 years, so plan accordingly. I think with that,
Indeed.
I'll jump into some TA here. Um, just briefly want to cover the S&P today. The macro to me looks like it has some things that are kind of showing up here. So if we look at how the fibs responded in the past, if we draw the fib from this dip here, which this was the 2020 dip, this peaked out about halfway above the 1.618 fib extension. All right. So if we extrapolate that out to the next move here and we pull the fib from this dip, we are now approaching the 1.618 Fibonacci extension. So could there be some resistance in that level? Yeah, you might see a little bit of consolidation or sideways movement, but based on what we saw here, and especially if this is a parabolic type of a movement, right? So, sorry if we were getting an echo there. If we take something like this, and you run that curve up, you can see that this is starting to peak in a parabolic way. So most likely we're going to see somewhere in this area, like around that 620, 622 area, where we'll peak out if this follows the path that it did with the Fibonacci sequence in the last movement that we had up in the last bull run for the S&P. So just something to keep in mind for the macro. This is my 73-day outlook. Nobody else uses this. There's math behind it. The year has 365 days. 365 is only divisible by 1, 5, and 73, as well as itself. So there is math behind this, and it gives you very, very clear signals on the macro as to where things are going. Right now, the oscillators are telling us that we are entering a parabolic phase for the S&P. So plan accordingly for that. I do expect that to carry into next year, probably right around the time that we were talking about, where North Korea is lifting their ban on short selling. Or actually, it was South Korea, excuse me. Who knows what North Korea does with their stock market, if they even have one. So if we take a look at Bitcoin futures here for CME, maybe in just a little bit of a falling broadening wedge here. What I do like is that there was this 4-hour bullish divergence. All right. So CME closed at 65,945. Keep in mind, CME kind of trades at a premium. So if we look at where Bitcoin's trading right now, we're sitting at about 66,471. So we could see a small gap down when CME opens today. All right, but for right now, 4-hour for BTC looks to have support at the 21 MA, which is pretty critical here. Just within about the last 12 hours, it looks like it's regained that level. So Something else to take a look at here. There is this 4-hour bullish divergence. So we just saw on the CME as well. So as long as Bitcoin holds that, and if you see this RSI break above 50 on the 4-hour, could see a move up. There's going to be some resistance at the 200 MA. That's around 68.1. All right. You've got your 100 MA curving down. If you get a cross up of the 200, and then finally get this 21 to curve back up and cross back above all of them, as you'll see here, when you're making this bullish move here, your 21 is going to be above all the moving averages. So we just want to see that cross. All right. So we'll look for that on the 4-hour. Honestly, things are looking pretty good right now. What I'm kind of seeing is that we've had our corrective phase here. So this would be like your corrective movement here. Okay. Lower lows and lower highs. And we've now created this structure here. Just kind of like a falling channel. You call it a falling wedge, falling channel, whatever you want to call it. Does have some bullish bias with this divergence. Stochastics are a little concerning. They're a little overbought at this point, and like they're trying to curve down, but I think that's just because we're seeing some consolidation above the 21 MA. This all honestly looks pretty good. All right, and you'll see something similar when we look at the Binance chart here. So that'll just be a little cleaner without the MAs. And again, we're pretty much in this falling channel. Wouldn't be surprised if we just kind of moved sideways out of it. So watch for that. Bitcoin dominance is breaking down. I did talk about this being possible. So now we're getting like a rounding top here. I did note some bearish divergence the last time that was creeping in. So see that divergence continuing to play out. And this just doesn't really look all that strong for Bitcoin dominance, which means that we may be getting some moves for our altcoins. If we take a look at the Tether dominance, this also had some bearish divergence, which is playing out on the 4-hour. So I'd like to see a further breakdown of this Tether dominance. So we'll have to see how that plays out over the next 24 hours or so. We need that to break down further in order for our altcoins to pump. Right now it looks like this is kind of trying to put in, higher lows, higher highs, with the RSI consolidating at the 50 level. So we need that RSI to break down below the 50 level and get a further breakdown, maybe to this point of control here at around 4.5% for the Tether dominance. If we're really going to see a big move up, we need to see a breakdown of this structure here and a further move down to this range around 4%. And we'll see a nice pump for the altcoins at that point. If we see a move up, you have 200 daily and 200 weekly as resistance at around just above 5%, 5.25%. For the USDT dominance, it's a little questionable right now. We're going to have to get a little more confirmation here. I would like to see this divergence break down a little bit further. Daily close will give us a little more of a clue as we see CME open. As we look at the total 3, I was kind of messing around with some Gaussian channels, but nothing really jumping out there, so I'll delete that out. What I am seeing on the 3-day right now, however, I like this candle that's printing. This candle has a bullish bias. This can be a reversal type of a candle with that wick and that small body. And there is also a little bit of hidden bullish on the 3-day. If we back out to the daily, you can see that you're actually printing a second green candle there. And not only do we have some of that hidden bullish here, all right, and it was very slight, mind you, but there is a little bit of hidden bullish there. What I like more is this bullish divergence here. So sometimes what we'll see is a hidden bullish flip into a bullish divergence, all right, where you can see that you look at the RSI here, you're lower in this area, a little higher in this area, but when you look at the price action, we swung down a little bit lower and bounced off of this wick here. So this is a nice bullish divergence on the daily. And when I see that hidden bullish flip into bullish, usually it means a stronger move is coming. So if we get above this point of control for this daily accumulation, it's going to be around $705 billion for the altcoins. Things should pick up. We never made it up to the golden pocket here when you swing out and look at the macro. So that should be the next move in this consolidation. The thing is, the weekly looks horrible. Like when you look at this, well, it looks like it's creating like a head and shoulders on the RSI. So I don't really want to see that break, right? And you could almost say maybe your neckline is like right there or something like that. It's a little sloppy. Can't really say that's like a confirmed neckline, but when I see those patterns on the RSI, it just makes me pause. So there's nothing saying that we can't come down and reaccumulate, but we're pretty close to the 200 daily. We're trying to hold the 21 MA on the weekly. The 200 weekly here probably sitting around 475 billion. So if we have to retest that, it would be a fairly significant move down, and you'd be, looking at a 33% haircut for your altcoins when they're already pretty beat up. So I think the odds of that are a little bit lower than maybe the weekly chart is showing. So we'll watch the 4-hour and the daily. When we look at ETH BTC, this is starting to make another move here on the 4-hour. All right, you've broken this point of control. This bullish divergence is playing out here, so this actually looks really strong. When we swing out to the daily, this shows this is just getting started. All right, just getting started. So this looks pretty strong for the ETH BTC pair. So for the bears there, don't know what to tell you, but it looks like something may be coming for ETH and for altcoins. If we look at the Ethereum USDT picture, we had a similar correction that we saw for Bitcoin with this ABCDE, where we see the 3 waves down. We're now seeing a move back up above the 21 MA and consolidation on the 4-hour. This consolidation actually looks a little stronger for Ethereum, as the RSI is actually above the 50 level. So keep an eye out for that. BNB is absolutely exploding sideways right now at this POC, hovering just above that level, that point of control around $606. Price action right now at around 609. Next levels to look out for would be around 663, 714, and above that 733, 756, 815, 869, and 913. All right, so that 913 is the aggressive measured move out of this breakout and retest. So we are getting the retest right now. On the last show, I questioned where we needed to see the retest at. We're clearly retesting this point of control now. So it's created a falling broadening wedge, and potentially this has a bullish bias. We'll have to see how Bitcoin reacts over the next 24 hours. If it's going to carry these large caps, Currently, XRP is making a move back to the downside after getting some rejection around 50 cents. So looking at the smaller time frames there, that may actually break down a little further. Yeah, that's going to come back down a little bit. So at the very least, I would look for XRP to come back down. You know, if it's bullish, it's going to hold this area here, right? If it needs more consolidation, you're looking at probably coming south of the golden pocket and into this area, even potentially down to the 886. And it has been retracing to the 886 quite a bit lately, so this was an 886 retracement right here, I believe. Pull that fib real quick so you can see. So pulling it from the bottom of that initial wick to the top of where this consolidation is at. And you can see that it wicked down almost to the 886 below the 786. So just keep an eye out for that. You could easily wick down to this volume node, which is around, just below 47 cents. So 47 cents could be a place to accumulate XRP. If you're just dollar cost averaging, 48 cents is a fine entry as well. All right. I really would like to catch along on this thing at some point and be able to hold it, because I do think XRP will blast and should see at least a 10x from here in the bull run. And that is like absolute minimum base case. My standard case for XRP, I'm looking at around 18 to 22, maybe even $30. Real bullish case, it could break triple digits, potentially even $200, $300 this bull run. I do not think XRP has the potential to go to 4 or 5 digits this bull run. I do think it has the potential to do that maybe even as soon as 2030 if we see a very unfortunate hyperinflationary environment, which honestly, when it comes down to it, I really don't wish that upon anyone, because most people will not be prepared for it. All right. So again, prepare accordingly. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. I have been accumulating Arrow. Arrow is in a fine accumulation zone here. Very nice entry at around 86 cents. Very low stochastics and a very strong hidden bullish divergence on the daily, which actually goes back to the inception of the pair. All right. So I think this is actually ready to make a really strong move. And if we look at where the macro Fibonacci retracement is at, it's just below the golden pocket. Basically wicked down just above the 706, which is kind of an institutional level. So if price action continues to move up above this golden pocket and finds support at the 21 MA on the daily, I would look for an uptrend to resume for this coin. And this ecosystem for Coinbase is likely to make an impact over the next 12 to 18 months in the bull run. All right, so keep an eye out for Arrow. That is one to accumulate. Keep an eye out for Notcoin as well. It's consolidating in this flag here. All right, it looks to be in a bullish type of a mode after breaking out of this falling wedge in this inverse head and shoulders. Okay, so we'll have to continue to take a look at that, but it looks right now. Let's see what this looks like when I zoom in. Yeah, there's no significant divergence there that's playing out on the 4 hour yet. There may be a little bit of hidden bullish right here. So that's what's holding you up right now, is that hidden bullish. Got your stochastics in a sort of middling position pointing up. So we'll see if Notcoin can make the move. The heavy resistance is going to be around 2.6 cents. And then, just above the 886 fib, if you see, about 2.9 cents flip into support, I would look for a larger move for Notcoin. And I do think that these levels will come fairly soon around this 1.618 fib extension, which is right around 4 cents, 3.5 to 4 cents. And the next level up from that would be just above 5 cents, close to 5.5 cents. So I do think those targets are coming for Notcoin. This is going to be a bullish coin in the bull run. So keep your eyes on that. Pendle Finance, this looks like it's starting to break out actually. There was a hidden bullish divergence that confirmed on the daily that flipped into bullish divergence. So remember what I was saying about that previously. When you see those on the daily, they're usually pretty strong. So this is starting to make a move up to the 21 MA right now. So this coin is up about 20% from the bottom, looking very bullish. And if we just pull this over just a little bit, potentially doing something kind of like that. So we'll keep an eye out for that for Pendle. I should have gotten in this coin at this area. I didn't jump in, but I'm thinking just FOMO at this point because the next target is $9.50 and probably north of that at this juncture. If we were to just pull like a basic head and shoulders measurement, yeah, you might move a little bit north of that. Might move to like just above $10 area for Pendle before choosing a trend direction there. Maybe coming back down and retesting this area around $7.50 for support. So look for that move for Pendle. All right. And Axelar, this is a coin that potentially could see a lot of use case. Do your own research on this. We are seeing a hidden bullish divergence into bullish divergence again. Bullish candles printing on the daily. This resistance line, there was a breakout and retest of that. This all just looks super, super bullish on the daily for Axelar. And if we look at like fib extension here, this coin could easily make it up to like, $4 area. So you could see a 4x out of this coin before the end of this year. So just keep an eye on this thing. Could really move. Coin that Chris is averaging into right now, this is Firo. I believe this is a privacy coin. So keep in mind right now, if this closes at this level on the daily, you're actually going to print a bullish divergence. So maybe a spot where you can start averaging in. There was rejection at this point of control in 200 daily, so you would have to flip like 182 into support on the daily for this thing to really flip into uptrend mode, but it's in a good spot. It may come back down a little bit more. Like if we look at the 3-day here and zoom out just a little bit, like this has the potential to do what Monero did, where it was in this kind of descending triangle kind of a thing, right? So if we look at that like that, you may see further breakdown on this pair, but it is in a spot where you can consider averaging in, and if it comes down around $1 or that area, I would start to average in a little more heavily and try to double up on your bag and see what happens. But this is a privacy coin and it does have some upside potential. Take a look here at where the all-time highs were at. This thing is down significantly, so down over 90%, and you could potentially 25x from here if you're to break new highs. So we'll wrap it up there for the altcoins. I don't think things are looking horrible. We're still consolidating. Bitcoin has to pick a direction. We're starting to see a green candle come in on the 4-hour here after some consolidation above the 21 MA. So to me, this is bullish consolidation with bullish divergence. That's where I'm going to leave it off right now, unless this 4-hour breaks down or there's some type of rejection at this spider line. I would expect price to break this point of control at 67.8. If we zoom in a little bit more, I think that point of control might move a little bit north, but that's right around where the major resistance is going to be at. It's going to be right around 68,000. So above 67.7, 68,000, momentum should pick up for this market, folks. Let's see what happens. Hopefully this is the bottom of the right shoulder and we're ready to break out. All right, so this has been another episode of the Crypto Clown World podcast. On your way out, please honk the like button, get subscribed to the channel if you're not, hit the bell for notifications if you haven't. We'll bring you these episodes in a timely manner going forward. And thanks to all the fathers out there as well. If you've made it this far on the broadcast, we appreciate you folks and everything that you are doing for your kids and as parents in this world. We hope that you're trying to be a guiding force. So thank you, everyone. God bless you all. Take care. Much love. We'll talk to you soon.